Good evening, everyone. This is Dion Brown, licensed therapist, mental health and wellness speaker, self care expert, and we're here for another episode of an integrated approach. Integrated approach is a broadcast once a month where we integrate various mental health related topics and connect them to spirituality. And we primarily do that from a Judeo Christian perspective, but we are very respectful of many faith traditions and type of religious frameworks. Tonight, we are grateful and excited because we're going to be talking about grief and loss and spirituality. You know, what makes those things connect, what makes those things intersect, what may be challenging for people, etc. So tonight's theme and topic will be grief, loss, and spirituality. So we are excited tonight. We're going to ask that as you all log in on real time on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On Facebook, you can like and share this broadcast and let other people know that we're on, as many people deal with and have dealt with grief and loss and how that connects to spirituality. We will repeat this as well, but you will also, if you're on Facebook, be able to ask a question, make a comment, and etc. So tonight we are excited that we have with us a special guest in the person of Mr. Danny Ross. I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit further, but he is a licensed therapist with years of training and experience concerning grief and loss, and specializes in working with others understand grief and loss as well. He is a licensed clinician in the state of Texas. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my brother on so that we can get started in this important discussion. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, doing well. How about you?
I am doing well also.
Awesome. So,
can you share with me and the listening audience just a few things about you and what you do? Anything about your background? And
sure. So I'm Danny L. Rice. I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor, and I'm here in the state of Texas. And I'm licensed in Texas, and I'm licensed in Mississippi, which is my home state. And I've been in practice probably about 10 years. I've served as as an educator for about 20 years. 10 of those years were as I was working as a school counselor and doing some other things. And but the last 5 years I've been full-time in practice. And so during that time, I've decided to do more focusing on grief, men's issues, and actually a lot of diversity and equity types of things. My relationship with grief started when I was about 4 years old. And there was always this mystery around grief for me. And I think it came from the angle of I knew something was going on, but I didn't quite have the words to put it into context as to what was happening. I saw my siblings crying. I saw different people having different types of emotions, but I want to bring you up to today where in 2021, I lost my sister, and then 2023, I lost my mother. 2025, I lost my brother on Super Bowl Sunday. So I have a plethora of grief just kind of hanging over me. And so I was telling a group I was working with yesterday, I said, either this grief is going to take me out or I'm going to do something with it. So that's kind of the story as to how grief, I was introduced to grief. And one of the things with grief is grief doesn't decide when it's going to visit you. It comes up and sets up residence in your house. And, I call it like they eat your potato chips, sit on the couch, and you can't do anything but let them do it. So grief is that thing that we have no control over. And I think so much is attached to that, the premise of the lack of control. So it takes our that ability to be in control and knowing what's next on the next day before. And it causes us to be a little bit anxious. So yeah, that's my whole story on that as to how I got started.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think one of the things that a person that does not specialize in grief, but obviously in this type of work, I talk with a number of clients about grief and loss. But I say to my clients, if you live long enough on this planet, you will experience some type of grief and loss.
Mhm.
Um, and I also can connect with you with having personal grief experiences as well,
Right.
and the impact. Um, so let's kind of dive in, because like I said, I think we all can share that we experience grief and loss and that feeling. And one of the things that's interesting, and I definitely have stories as well to share. Those of you on our listening audience, and we'll be repeating as we go along, feel free to chime in, ask a question, make a comment, and we'll try to get to it. But grief changes us in ways, right?
Yes, it does. I think honestly that's one of my foundational principles in the work that I do
Mm,
is helping people understand that you will never be the same person when grief visits you. And it's oftentimes uniquely different for every person. And even when we know the death is coming, it's terminal, you're still not set, you're not set up for what is going to take you through. So there are different phases, the highs, the lows, the in-betweens. And so I tell people all the time, it has no face and is not contained in the 5 stages of grief, as we love to say. Oftentimes people like to think that that's actually a model for dealing with grief or a theoretical principle. But Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she created that for the terminally ill. And so one of the things that we have to do is move away from that framework, because what it does, it puts people into categories and makes them feel as though that they have to go through those 5 stages. And I just think it's so rigid, and I don't like the rigidity of it. So I would love for us to bring some different models. And I come from more of a model of a continuing bonds model, and we can talk about that later whenever you want.
wow. Yeah, that was great. That was
Yeah.
that was definitely great. And I think yeah, we graduate school, death and dying programs everywhere. The Elizabeth Kubler-Ross approach is heavily ingrained, and people have
Mhm.
uh, cemented that as grief, the grief Bible, right?
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes. And
but
if we want to be honest, we'll also cement it as therapists. That's our go-to versus understanding there are so many different approaches for grief, but that one to me is very rigid, and it's so simplistic that it doesn't take into the account of the emotional pieces that go along with that. So often I tell people my approach is more so about first of all, when we get into grief, there's sometimes we're in a traumatic kind of place to where we can't even talk, we can't even discuss it, because we're in that place to where I don't have the words, I'm dysregulated. So this is my trauma, this is my trauma, this is grief, and nobody knows the story of grief for you and what's contained in your trauma until it happens, typically. And so what we have to do is break down all the trauma that goes along with you and your grief. And
mm,
then when we get to the open palm means that we're in grief. We're ready to process the loss. We're ready to talk about the story. So I'm just all about grief because I've lived it. So I've had to really armor myself. And I remember trying to find good therapists who
mm,
specialized in grief, and I would get things like the 5 stages. So I said, let me just do what I need to do and just get a few more classes and go into different workshops and taking a few more courses. So it's been a journey, but I'm really happy that I can help other people.
absolutely. And I think, like I said, we all experience
Mhm.
the emotion of grief from losses that occur. And
Mhm.
some of those losses are anticipated or
Mhm.
expected losses. We know that we're going to be losing someone through a sickness or a condition, so we in a way, I would say mentally and emotionally are able to prepare for it. Some, other times we have sudden losses that almost feel like they kind of stab us with a knife, right? Because they're so they're so unexpected. I'll tell a brief story. Years ago, when I was visiting the state of New Orleans for the first time, I got a unfortunate phone call that one of the young people that I used to work with and who sat under me as a youth pastor during the time when I functioned, that he had a sudden tragic death.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Wow. And so that was unexpected grief and loss. And as you can imagine, there was even as a therapist, there was an array of emotions while I was away on this trip.
Right.
Yeah. So sometimes people, sometimes people have some time to prepare for a loss. Other time people get a sudden phone call.
Right. Or they get that Facebook post that they weren't prepared for while they're flying home to visit their sick sister. How about that?
Yes. Right. Yes.
Do you mind if I talk a little bit about etiquette?
Go ahead.
I think one of the things, social media is a wonderful thing. I think there's so many things that we can get from it, but I'm always thinking sometimes because of that experience, there's an anxiousness to be the first to tell somebody what's going on, and it doesn't give the person time to process or even. I mean, you don't know where I am. You don't know if I know or not. I say give people at least 24 hours if you are uncertain if the family member or an extended family member is not aware, because I'm telling you, I about fell out in the airport because I had a layover and I started going through my phone. I knew she was ill, but I didn't know it was like that. I know they just told me to come home. And so when I did and I saw that really was devastating to kind of find out in the airport via Facebook with no one there. So I just encourage you, get off Facebook and talk to people and make sure you give them time. Your condolences are just as good 24 hours from when it happened or when you found out.
I absolutely agree and love that. I think we're in there's pros and cons to social media, and one of the cons is people announcing on a social media site the loss of someone suddenly, because it hits them very differently, particularly if you're close to that person. So and so one of the people said, Devarda Jones said she agrees.
Yeah,
absolutely. There needs to be time and space to do that. And with that being said, whenever we experience a loss, there seems to be a obviously we know that there's sadness, right? But let's talk about the emotionality of loss, or grief and loss. What other emotions, especially have you seen?
I think one of the things that I've done a little bit more research, and I recently did a workshop called Grief in Real Life, and it came from the angle of oftentimes we think people just come into the office sad. They don't just come into the office sad. They come in angry. They come in depressed. They come in with so many different, I call them the exterior kinds of things. But I often say, like, if you're not trained in grief or you don't know how to process and get down to the heart of what's really going on, which is grief. Sometimes the grief has happened 20 years ago and they're still angry and they're still upset because there's no language for what's happening in their life. Nobody has helped them understand, like, you're dealing with buried messages, which is the first book that I wrote. And I have this kind of like facilitation little tool that I use to help people discover their buried messages, because oftentimes we have, there's this historical kinds of data that we come into our experiences with, thinking about how you were raised. We don't talk about it. Greater is he that is in me than he who is in the world. What's the one that I used to say? To be absent with the body is to be present with
the Lord. Yep.
I love it. I love it. But I had an experience to where I said that a bit prematurely. And I knew I said it prematurely, but we're so taught to over spiritualize things. And when you're in that particular moment, you don't allow yourself to even take in the shock. I just lost a friend. I just lost a family member. But I always tell people, I know my faith is strong. I know who rules my future. I know who does everything in my life. However, I am human and I need to deal with that human part of me. So I'm going to give this back because I will talk about grief all day.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely. And let's dive into let's go. Dive into that. Listen, that is an excellent example of spiritual bypassing.
Come on. Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Right? Because we are human, we have the human experience. When there's a loss, we're going to feel grief. We're going to be sad. We may have some anger. We may be shocked. Certainty. And unfortunately, in our religious communities, right, when we're talking about the integration of grief, loss, and spirituality, unfortunately, sometimes in our religious communities, people try to, or others try to persuade people to bypass their natural, normal human emotions and behaviors related to grief. Feel your anger, feel your sadness, feel your pain. Feel your shock, and then later bring in faith and spirituality in your processing of the loss. Later it's to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Yeah.
Later,
yes, most later.
This person is with the Lord now. Later.
It doesn't happen immediately. And even that, I was just thinking, oftentimes what tends to happen is, those scriptures are real, most definitely. But I also think, what we're talking that spiritual bypassing, sometimes that's for the other person to feel good about themselves and to not have to feel or deal with somebody else's pain. So I just throw a Band-Aid on it, which is a scripture, or I say something that we think is encouraging, which typically is not encouraging. And before you know it, we are in this space to where we feel as though we need to move forward because this person says to be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord. And I'm a person of faith. And if I believe that, I'm supposed to move in that and believe in that same way, that same moment. We have to be careful as Christians, as people of faith, to make sure that we are present with what's happening to people during their loss. And you hadn't even gotten the story good from the person. Can you at least, hey, is there anything that I can do? Hey, I'm here to sit with you. If you'd like to talk, I'm here. You're going to throw a scripture down my throat and have me mad at you.
We got a question.
Come on, question. I said, okay, come on.
Great question. Can you see this question?
Well, what about a person who feels guilty and ashamed because they don't feel sad because of an abusive relationship, by the person deceased? And so that's kind of like the disenfranchised grief. There's certain types of grief we can't fully explore because, you hear me? Because of how it happened. Let me just name some of them. You were raped, you were abused, you were shot, you were killed, HIV/AIDS, certain things like that. We don't go around telling about those types of deaths, but it's also a part of the experience of the loss. But what happens? You can't talk about it because societal pressures make you feel like something is wrong. And when something is wrong and it's suppressed, it makes you feel as though you can't talk about certain things. I say to you, DeVarda, you feeling ashamed or feeling guilty, and there's nothing wrong with having those feelings and having those emotions, but oftentimes we really have to process and challenge our some of the thoughts. And are these our thoughts, or are they somebody else's thoughts that have been projected onto us and we have let them stick to us? Part of what we work on when we're in my practice is, what's the truism of the story for you? Not what somebody told you, this is what it means here. And what I do is I give you a safe place to where I don't judge your story. I allow you to feel what you need to feel. If you're feeling sad or you're feeling shame in that moment, let's explore where that's coming from. And I use an iceberg model too. Mm-hmm. I talk about the things on the surface of our grief. That's the iceberg. But then there's beneath the grief. There's the part under the water. And that's really the heart of why you struggle. That's really the heart of why things are so difficult for you and why we live in shame. Those are the emotions, instead of the sadness, you crying and you not wanting to get out of bed. That's typical. That's normal. But what's connected to it underneath? Because that's how we feel bad. But think about what's underneath. I feel bad that I'm happy that they're gone.
Yeah.
They were suffering. You didn't want to see them that particular way, but there's this consciousness in you, and the consciousness of the world, that makes you feel as though that you are not supposed to feel that way. But it's the truth. Your life has been upside down trying to take care of your parent who has Alzheimer's, or your brother who is ill, and you haven't been able to really rest or relax. I'll tell you a story for me. For the last probably 5 years, I've been on pins and needles, just trying to be okay, because I'm wondering, is this the day? Is this the day that it's going to happen? So I couldn't go out of town, or I could go out of town, but I didn't want to go out of town. You know why? I did not want to be in a place where I could not get to them quickly. And I had one of my colleagues tell me, they said, you know what? You have not been able to live. And it did not register to me. That's what I was doing until it had happened. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need people around you to help you process in a way that's good for you. And we were just having a conversation, nothing clinical, but I was just telling her about my experience. And through that experience, we learned that I have been holding, I was just hypervigilant, and you can't stay in that place and be healthy. And no, did I want my loved one to die or to go away? No, but I also don't want them to suffer. Right. And we have to come to a place to where, I want to share this real quick. Sure. I'll say it that way. I had a relative who was just mean to me. And I think this goes to DeVard, what she was talking about. Just mean to me. And I remember my sister called me and said, and this was years ago, and she said, such and such is dead. And it hit me. Yeah, but I didn't feel one thing, because what I felt was the truth. They were horrible to me. They treated me poorly. They weren't kind. They said some mean and ugly things to me. And I gave myself permission to feel what I needed to feel. Now, did I grieve him like I grieve just people in general? Yes. But I didn't feel like it was like someone really close and I would miss them. But because of societal factors, and we have to be a certain way, and just think about it, we have been mistreated. This person has basically, in a sense, abused me emotionally. And I'm supposed to, I guess I'm like, oh, wow. And so I had to capture myself, because when the person told me, I knew it was hard for them. Yep. And so I said, well, let me just give you a call back. That's really terrible. And so I had to gather myself, because underneath my iceberg were those hidden emotions, those buried emotions that resurface at the time of the death. And you don't realize what you're truly dealing with until the death occurs. You think you have an idea, And you really don't have an idea until you really put yourself in that situation and you allow yourself to feel all the feels and not what somebody told you need to feel. Feel what you need to feel.
Right. And your real authentic feelings. And I think in working with a case study some years ago, I have a large pool of men in my practice, some ladies, but a large pool of men. And you know, there has been various types of abuses that men have experienced as well. And I think if I remember the case correctly, there was an abuse, and the type of the abuse, the relative, as we were working together, maybe like 3 years ago, and while we were working together, the person who abused him died, and he was emotional, very emotional, but it was more of a good anger, anger. He was happy, it was anger that still was manifested. Go ahead.
It's interesting. I don't know. I felt like at that moment, I just felt indifferent. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel any kind of way. I was just like, they were a terrible person. They were just terrible to me. And so I have to give people what they gave me. If that's how you treated me, that's how you treated me. You don't get to be a martyr because you're deceased now. That's where, and I'm going to say this, I feel like that's something that we do in the Black church. We make people martyrs because they're deceased now. We all know how we get up there. We talk about Uncle JoJo and he got 500 kids, or, cousin Shoo, and we know what she used to do, around town. But we clean them up in our dialogue.
We definitely clean them up.
Oh, they are the best person. They gave me their last. I had an uncle. Who I love to this day. And you know why I love him? Because he was real to the day he died. He would have a little sip here and now. And I ain't gonna say a little bit, I'm gonna just say a little sip here and there. But he was authentic in who he was. And that's how I want to remember him. At the end of the day, he was kind to me. He would give me money when I came home from school. And I felt like I had a pretty good relationship with him. That's the realness that I want to talk about. Now, but what we do is we put bleach on them and we clean them up to fit the house of God. And I just don't think that's fair, because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And I think that's just as much his story as, those perfection stories. So I just think there's a place to where we can have the duality. Yeah, he wasn't perfect, but he also was a good person and he did great things. And I'm sad to see him go, but he lived. And I love that.
Nice. And so, like I said earlier, if we live long enough, we will experience some levels of grief and loss, and people cope with that differently. Coping with the devastating loss of a loved one, whether it's expected or sudden, looks different, for different people.
Yes.
Some people may cope with withdrawing and being isolative,
right
while they're going through sadness. Some people try to numb their coping by drinking a whole lot of alcohol, smoking a lot of marijuana, tapping into other vices, perhaps, gambling and sexual vices as well. So let me see. Okay, cool. So, what do you typically see on the spectrum of healthy versus unhealthy ways that people try to cope with their loss?
Yeah, we talk about we're very realistic in our approach to that. Like, I don't necessarily believe in healthy, but I believe in typical. This is what should be typically happening at this particular time. I had a job working at the hospital as a bereavement specialist. And I'll tell this real quick, but something I didn't have to do. But I wanted to marry my experience with somebody else's experience. And I think it's something unique to understand how other people deal with death. And so one of the things that I was required to do was sit with people who had just lost a child, or we had a medical records review or something like that. And so you're in the raw of it. And so I was appreciative to marry my clinical skills plus my lived experience, but also I felt like I didn't know anything else about other people's processing of those raw emotions, because I think when they enter into our office, it's kind of sterile. Like we see where they've gotten it together a little bit, but in the rawness, it reminds me this person was precious to them. This person didn't live their entire life. They should have gone, the parents should have gone before them. Those are the kinds of things that makes me understand, like, what's beneath the surface? What is the buried message that's underneath there that really is keeping the person from moving forward? And I don't say that we move on, we move forward, because we're going to be forever in this thing called grief. Can I do a quick demonstration for you? Okay, so, and it's just because I have it available in front of me because of my workshop. But say, for instance, this is your experience with grief. This is grief right here. It's pliable, it moves, but it still has the same consistency, right? Mm-hmm. So I put it in this glass, and it's pretty much all really tightly around it. I always call this is one of the phases to where I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to get out of bed. Don't you talk to me. I dare you to give me a scripture. That is this place, because oftentimes we grieve, but at some point we get to move in our grief, and we don't get to just move, but we get to draw different experiences around it. So here's the middle of the grief. So this is saying, like, okay, I'm putting my tiptoe out there. I'm trying life again. I'm going back to work. Maybe I have some good laughs here and there, but I retreat back to that experience of where the grief comes in and out. So here is one of the stages where I really feel like most of us, this is where I want us to be, understanding that the grief is still there. We just expand our world around the grief. The grief is always going to be there, but we expand our world around it. And that's something we have to, sometimes we say, like, I just don't feel it. Sometimes you have to actively do some things differently to start the feeling. Because if you're still in the bed, you know, you haven't even tried to live again. And so I often say, if we're still at that place a year, you know, in the DSM-5, if you're still in that place a year after the death, and you're like really still in the bed, you want that person to come back, you can't imagine life without them, that's called complicated grief.
Yes, sir.
So when we're in that complicated grief, we really need to get into a therapist and see somebody. And sometimes we need to get our medication. We need to get some depressive medications, some anti-anxiety medications, and do what's necessary so that somebody just wrote something. Let's see. So keep going.
There's two.
Keep going, because I can talk, man. I love the subject.
I just put it on the screen.
Okay.
Hazel Dunvice says she has some widow friends who are in denial of the death of their husband, and that's their way of coping. And, and she also said, and it's an entirely different world. That's the struggle.
Yes. It's interesting you say that, Hazel, because I think about, I'm living here in Texas, and most of my family is in Mississippi. Every time I go home, I grieve all over again, like it's the first time.
Man.
Because you're, out of mind, out of sight. And I've always kind of, they're doing their thing, they're healthy. But when I'm faced with it, like I'm going home to Mississippi to my mama's house, and my mama ain't gonna be there. She's gonna be in a grave. My brother's gonna be in a grave, and my sister is going to be in a grave. Can you imagine how that distorts your world that you used to? Like, this is what I do when I go home. Home is totally different now. Home is totally different. You have one more minute, sir? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
Well, I have an experience to where I remember going home, probably one of the first times after my mom died, and one of my roles was to, like when I came home, they just kind of they call it putting out that she yours. You do whatever you need to do, take care of her. But it gave them a sense of peace knowing that she was with somebody who cared about her and who wanted to be there and make sure she was good. So what happens with my role when I go back and that person is no longer there? And it was Memorial Day to where I realized that my experience in life will never be the same. My Columbus going home will never be the same. And in that process, every time I go home, I digest it a little bit different, a little bit more each and every time as to they actually are gone. And I don't always see that as just a negative experience because it left me with so much. But a lot of times people get trapped in the end cap. This is how it ended versus they lived such a big life prior to that final destination, in a sense, that final story. So there was so much more to them than just the death. And so for me, that's what gives me comfort. It gives me comfort when I hear a certain song that my sister used to sing at church. I pray that they all are ready. It gives me comfort when I get in my kitchen and I try to make my mom a sweet potato pie or her dressing. Those are the things that give me comfort. Or I pass by the grocery store where my brother used to work. And sometimes I'll just go in and I won't buy anything. It makes me feel a bit closer. I tell people, do what you need to do. This is your experience. Nobody can tell you what that person meant to you, but you also have to figure out what are some of the things that they left you with. I created an assessment for that as well. So things like that can be really be helpful and help us clinically in a sense. But for me, I've coined this phrase called the kitchen table.
Okay.
And instead of looking at what I do as a therapist who's helping somebody through grief, I go back to the kitchen table where it all went down in most of our homes. We ate there. We talked about people there. We cooked there. It was a central location to where we exchanged information. And instead of being that clinical therapist, I want to be a witness to the story. What do we notice about a witness? A witness listens. A witness listens to and sees what's happening, and they can tell the story when they go on the witness stand. But as clinicians, sometimes what we tend to do is we tend to throw out a therapy kind of technique or a therapy theory. And right now, it's really just a heart matter. Can you listen? Wow. That's the first stage. Can you listen? Can you hear their story? And all parts of the story, not just the death.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hazel Weiss commented with a question.
She said denial. Denial is good? I think. Okay, I saw it. So denial is good. My thing is, it's a coping strategy for a time such as this. I tell people all the time, like when we overcorrect on the road, what do we tend to do? We tend to go one side real quickly and we stay there. And then what we want to do is shift to the middle and we keep in the lane. But right now, you're probably having to go over here to the extreme to save yourself. But I don't want you to stay on this side forever. I want you to move to the center. But I also realize sometimes those are coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And denial for a season, whatever you need to do to get through that. Now, if you in denial after 6 months, we kind of like,
yeah,
we gotta see what's happening. So it's like there's some kind of barrier that's keeping you from processing the truth.
Okay, thank you. And since we're talking about grief, loss, and spirituality, people do use across religious traditions and frameworks, people do use their faith or spiritual perspective to help them make sense, of the suffering, or the loss. I think, commonly in a Judeo-Christian perspective, it is common if let's say a person had a terminal, he or she has some sort of terminal illness and they pass away, right? Whatever that is. And today people are passing away from a lot of medical stuff, right?
Right.
Like you said earlier, we don't want the person to suffer and be in pain. So with a spiritual perspective, it does help people to maybe process in people's minds and a lot of spiritual perspectives. It becomes a hard pill to swallow. Maybe that this was God's will, right? And that the person is now, which that's a whole nother subject. And the person is now with the Lord, but still that doesn't take away the pain, right?
Right.
Feeling of the loss and the grief, but it can be a coping mechanism to help a person make sense of things if they lean in on their spirituality.
Most definitely. And like I say, everything should be done in a healthy kind of way. Now, there are some people who hide behind their spiritualness and they never do any work to deal with the death. And so when inadvertently they start weeping just out of nowhere, or they're on edge, or they're mean as the devil, as people.
Yep.
Those are the things that we have to look at, because I'm like, you know how to play the part.
Yep. And Hazel Weiss commented again. I almost missed this one. She said, no, when we talked about the denial person, it's been 3 years.
Oh yeah, 3 years. We got to do stuff.
Yeah. So definitely at that point, they want to bare minimum see a therapist one-on-one to work through the grief or loss, and probably consider, like you offer, a grief support group or something.
That's a good point.
To kind of help them navigate. Go ahead.
Well, I was looking for, sometimes I just, I do the therapy, right? But I have found like the grief support group has been that thing that like has opened up some eyes and helped people to understand.
Absolutely.
Sometimes people just feel alone because, let's be realistic, nobody wants to talk to you about somebody who died.
Yeah.
Because it makes them think about their own mortality, or somebody is suffering, or what might happen to them. I always tell people, like, grief therapists, I don't think that they're in abundance. I know they're out there, but I don't see a lot of them, because it deals with a place that nobody wants to go.
And the reality, sir, the reality is, we don't like thinking about, as humans. I just turned. I got older. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, you ain't gonna say. I love it.
And as humans, we don't, we, like you said, it causes us to question our own mortality. The amount of people that I have seen leave this world versus when I was 20 is astounding to me. Right? And so it causes us to think about our own mortality. And the reality is, there's a Christian scripture that says it's appointed unto men once to die, then the judgment. So we all.
Yeah, we know that's going to happen.
We have an appointment with death. We don't know when or how, but we know it's going to happen, right?
But here's my thing with that. I'm glad you're bringing this up, but avoidance makes it so much more difficult when you know this is something you're going to deal with, not just for you, but on and on and on. And think about the people around you. What we learn to do is assimilate. Well, ain't nobody over here talking about it. I ain't gonna talk about it either. I know these people don't want to talk to me about how I'm feeling. They may not, but there's somebody who does. And sometimes I tell when I supervise, I say, you're sometimes the first person that allows a person to be heard. Be careful how you use that session, because it can make somebody close off, or it can open somebody up because they feel comfortable and they feel at peace, and you make them feel safe. We can be good at not making people feel safe.
Absolutely. And a great, reflection again. Hazel Weiss said, "I found for me it's the one-on-one counseling for me. I find the group therapy is too much compounding grief." Fair. That's fair.
That is.
Understanding. There's different modes of help and assistance for different people. I've definitely had clients say they don't like groups in general. I've had clients who have been very open and welcome to groups, and sometimes we have people do one-on-one counseling and groups. And in the same mode of kind of integrating grief, loss, and spirituality. Some people, as far as support, where's your support? So when you go see an individual therapist or like a licensed grief specialist, like Ross, for example, you are getting and gaining professional support, right?
Right.
Which is great. Having supports of family and friends, if available, is great as well. But also, there are, for people, there are spiritual practices that people can engage in wherever they fall within their religious or spiritual tradition. Most spiritual religious traditions have things like, prayer and meditation and reflection as well.
Yeah.
But also, one of the great things about a religious or spiritual community, that's pretty much what I was going to get to. There is a sense of community in that religious formation. Because is it safe to say, sir, that most people don't navigate well through grief and isolation?
Oh yeah, I would. Well, honestly, it just depends. I just say, for instance, when Father's or Mother's Day comes around, and I practice it more so with my father than with my mother, which is more recent. But with my father, when that time came around, I just wanted to be by myself. I didn't want somebody telling me it's gonna get better, and I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not built like that. I don't necessarily want to hear that, and I'll acknowledge it. I'll, thank you. But for me taking time with myself, me honoring that moment with my dad, if it's in the bed laid up, but if that's what I need to do, that's what I need to do.
Okay. Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I get it. For sure. Now, we talked about people trying to make sense of, the grief and loss, and ways that people cope with grief and loss, and, possible things that people can plug into, whether individual counseling, one-on-one, as well as group therapy, etc. But grief also impacts us socially. In reference to other people, So it may affect our relationships with people, right? In various ways. And that's when we go into, sometimes people will isolate and shut down. Other people will, because they're grieving or certain like you said earlier, like, oh my goodness, you're talking about a global manifestation of grief and loss feelings when things like Mother's Day, Father's Day come up. Definitely those are big times where people are going through it. Holidays. So grief and loss can affect people, and has affected people relationally, and I definitely see it in my practice as well, where some people, and I'm mindful of it, some people want to be around people and socialize and interact, and some people want to be by themselves and alone. And guess what? At least what I've seen, and you can chime in too, I've seen people change, meaning one year they want to be the life of the party and go out and socialize. You know, I have a guy under 23. Unfortunately, he lost his mom. There are times where he will want to go out with his family and do things. And one of the things I learned from you, I didn't tell you I learned from you, but one of the things I learned from you a while ago was to one way that's helpful for people when they're going through the difficult emotions is to also do things that connects them to that person in a positive way. So going out, so they might go out to her favorite restaurant or eat a certain food that she likes to eat. So I saw this situation where one time he was able to go out, socialize, interact. The other time he was just bummed out. One Mother's Day, he was socializing. The next Mother's Day, he was like, "Oh, she want to be left alone." So have you seen some of that change?
I have seen that. I've seen that. I can even say for myself, I tell people just because I do this grief stuff doesn't mean that I'm disassociating or I don't feel anything. Honestly, as I share part of these stories now, there's a welling up. We talk about the somatic types of things that go on with us. And so, we talked about yesterday, where do you feel that in your body somatically? And so sometimes it's your neck, sometimes it's your head, sometimes it's your chest, sometimes it's your stomach. Things like that let you know, like, oh, maybe you feel it's about to come on. They're indicators of something. And, I do some work in people who deal with anxiety. And oftentimes the problem with anxiety is the fear. Typically it's fear of something or control of something. And you don't want to lean into that thing. And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, like, we don't want to talk about or acknowledge grief. For me, I'm this kind of person. I know it's going to happen. Why am I going to try to avoid it? I need to know everything I can so that I can be okay mentally. I can make sure other people are okay, but it's that avoidance to where everything kind of topples down on you because you don't have any tools. You don't have any prep work in the game. And so you're devastated. You don't know how to even pay bills because you never allowed yourself to actually feel the grief. You never allowed yourself to be a part of anything that made you feel uncomfortable when it came to death. And so for me, I think too, probably I had no choice at 4 years old. It built curiosity in me as to how can you be here one day and gone the next, and then that's my dad, but how can he be gone? And nobody explained it to me.
Wow.
I just had to piecemeal it together. I think about it as I talk today. I knew, but I didn't know. And so today, even that little boy will come up again and have some questions that are unanswered that connect to these most recent losses as to truthfulness. And part of my truthfulness, like, if dad could leave, why would anybody else stay? Who can I trust if the people who are in charge of teaching me things are not truthful and are not honest, or they leave without saying goodbye? We're thinking about a 4-year-old.
Right.
It sets up residence as to a lack of trust. So for me, I just identified that probably 2 or 3 years ago, that I have a lack of trust, and it's connected to that, those buried messages. So all I say, if you don't have anything else to go on, think of the iceberg. Emotions we get to talk about, the sadness, the tears. I don't want to do anything, but underneath that, more than likely, the death is connected to something else. And that's what we want to help them process, because sometimes the meaning of the death is distorted and it's off. And we play this guilt game. And I'll say this, joy is not betrayal. You get to live again after that person dies. I don't want to, but joy is not betrayal. And when I think about my mama and I think about my brother, my sister, I can see them kicking my tail if I rolled over and died, or I didn't do the things that I was supposed to do with that.
So there's life again. There's life
again.
There's life again after a loss.
Life again after loss. And also I just say, find out, how can you integrate them back into your life? We retell the story. We find out ways to. Go ahead.
I like that. I was saying I like that.
Yeah, retelling the story. Find out ways that we can reintegrate them into our lives. Come up with ways to make meaning. David Kessler talks about the 6th stage of grief, and with the 6th stage of grief, he talks about meaning making. I like that. I connect with that. So I went to a conference, and I know we got to go, but I went to a conference, and I want to end with this. And it set me free because all I heard was the 5 stages, and I could not connect with that. But when I heard continuing bonds, I could gel with that. And what I do is give people permission to bring that person back into their lives in a way that's healthy for them. We cannot bring the body back, but we can bring the essence of who they are, what they brought into our lives, and see how much is still connected to you.
Wow, I like that. Yeah, you're right. Time is definitely escaping us. This is something.
Yeah,
I like that. Trying to make meaning. So everybody listening, yes, there is. It may not be the easiest all the time, but there is life again after the loss.
Yes,
you can live again. And so what if it requires you to work through some of that with someone, one-to-one in a therapeutic space or in a group space? Do it because there is life for you to live again. I brought my friend and colleague Danny Ross from Texas, who is a grief specialist. And Hazel Weiss, I'm gonna put this on the screen too. She said she couldn't connect with the 5 stages either.
See Hazel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And like you said earlier, you said there's a number of other stages.
Oh yeah. And don't get me wrong, those things are good, but we also have to be honest and tell people the truth about them. And I'm like, as clinicians, we really need to be aware of that information. It wasn't meant for that. She didn't mean it to be used in that context. But there are some principles of it that make sense, but it's typically for the person who has died. I'll say this too, anticipatory grief is something that oftentimes we don't talk about. It's the stage right before the actual death in a terminal illness. And that can be the hardest period because they're there, but they're also gone. That's a whole nother subject, but I just, that's something to give people permission to deal with. That's
absolutely. Sir,
yes, sir.
I would request of you 2 things as we prepare to exit. I'm going to ask everybody that's on Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube to like, share, comment. The replay of this broadcast will be 2 places on my personal Facebook page, Dion Brown. It'll be stored there, as well as my YouTube channel, DMV Therapist. It'll be stored there as well. So if you need to watch the replay or refer somebody else to it, you can. Sir, can you do 2 things as we close? Can you give us some parting words concerning grief, whatever comes up for you to share?
Yeah.
As well as ways people can connect with you, any projects, any support groups, or anything you want to put out there.
I have so much stuff going on with grief. You just have to go to my website. And that's www.dlrcounselinggroup.com, or you can go to my Facebook under DLR Counseling Group. I think you'll get more from the Facebook group, but I list everything that I'm doing there as
What's that? Can you give that website slower again, please?
Oh, DLR
DLR.
D as in Danny, L as in lion, R as in Rose, Counseling Group. And .com. And so you can connect with me there if you want to ask me questions. I'm more than happy to answer questions for you or put you into the direction of where you can get the supports you need. The supports that you need. And so whatever, so do what you need to do. But I do say even have a conversation with grief, because there are some things that we give our power over to the pain. Have a conversation, just like I say with anxiety. Sometimes we have to lean in. Nobody ever died from emotions. Get in there, do the work. And I think you're going to have a much better experience once you get in there, you do the work, and you talk to somebody about how you feel versus stuffing. And what is the legacy you want to continue from your loved one? What's the relationship you had with them? Bring all of that to the surface and reimagine what the relationship can be now, even with them gone.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Good stuff. All right. So I put in the comments Mr. Danny Ross's website, as well as I posted it in the comments on IG as well. So please go to his website, like you said, to connect with him and to see all that he's offering and doing around grief and loss. We are here every first Sunday, generally. We're a little off this month because of February being a short month, but we're here talking about various subjects related to mental health and wellness and integrating spirituality. This has been great. This has been very useful, very informative. And I'm sure many people will, as we will be sharing much of this, content this week, one way or another, sharing this broadcast as well. So we want to thank you all, and we will see you all next month.